Welcome to the WOHASU live version of the Happiness Lab. I am super excited to introduce my guest, Dr. Rangan Chatterjee. Dr. Chatterjee is professor of health education and communication, the host of the Feel Better, Live More podcast, which is the most listened to health podcast in Europe. He's also the author of 5 best-selling books, including his most recent, Happy Mind, Happy Life, 10 Simple Ways to Feel Great Every Day. And today we're going to be talking about why medical doctors need to pay even more attention to happiness. WOHASU audience, are you all interested in medical doctors paying more attention to happiness? Yes. So Rangan, you've long been an advocate of the importance of all kinds of healthy practices, things like stress reduction and exercise and eating better, and how these things are really important for our overall health. But lately in your most recent book, you've been making the claim that medical professionals also have to pay attention to something else, something that historically doctors haven't paid much attention to, which is people's happiness. Why is a happy life important for a healthy life?
So I've been practicing now for over 2 decades, okay? So during that time, I've seen tens of thousands of patients, and it's very clear to me, and it's very clear in the research, that about 80 to 90% of what a doctor like me is going to see in any given day is in some way related to our collective modern lifestyles. Now, let me be really clear with that. I am not putting blame on anybody. Okay, modern life is tough, it's very stressful, and so if you start off with the belief and the view that 80 to 90% of our medical problems are in some way related to the way we're living our lives, the next logical step is to go, okay, well, we need to educate our patients on what those things are that they can then change. And so you mentioned food, movement, sleep, stress reduction, the things that I call the 4 pillars of health. And for many years, I've been talking about that in public, and I think that's incredibly useful. But for the last few years, I've been wondering, is that really the root cause, or is there something even higher than that? And that's what led me to happiness, because I realized that actually for many people, their lifestyle behaviors, they weren't necessarily the root cause. They were a cause of sorts, but they were a downstream consequence of their moods, of the way they approached the world, of the state of their lives, of their happiness. Right, so I think most people will intuitively understand that happier people will naturally make better lifestyle choices. Okay, you're not going to dive headfirst into a tub of ice cream in the evening, generally speaking, if you feel pretty content with life. Usually, for most people, it's a way of managing stress or internal discomfort or loneliness. So I found that we can tell patients about these lifestyle choices, but if those lifestyle choices are their way of coping with the stress in their life, they're never going to change their behavior unless I help them change their stress, for example. So that's one way of answering your question. But actually, if you go into the research, there seems to be this link between happiness and health that goes beyond these lifestyle behaviors. And actually, Laurie, when you came onto my podcast maybe 2 or 3 years ago, you shared with me a really powerful study that made a real impact on me, which was that study where I think it was psychologists who did it, when they took people into a laboratory and they injected rhinovirus up their nostrils. Pretty pleasant study, right?
Okay, IRB approval, I'm sure it was all
So
good, yeah.
rhinovirus is the bug that causes the common colds. Now, what was interesting about this study is that they could determine, or they could see quite clearly an association between your mood and whether you got sick from the virus. So basically, as Laurie told me on my show, the group who were in the not so positive mood category, right, got sick 3 times less than the happier group. Essentially, let me say that another way. The happier group, did I say that the right way, or did I say it the wrong way?
This is
I think I might have said it right.
You all get to see how the sausage is made, which is we never say stuff right on podcasts, but you always hear it right because we edit it out. So you're going to get the beauty of editing it out. Okay, laugh now, but okay. All right.
But I think I did say, actually, I think I said it right, and then I thought I didn't say it right. But essentially, what it showed was that the not so positive mood group got sick 3 times as much, right? So that's pretty remarkable. So why does a doctor then need to know that? Well, if we're not thinking about mood and well-being and happiness, well, that study is showing a pretty compelling association between your immune system function and your happiness. So more and more, I've been led down to the belief that actually we need, as doctors, to be talking about happiness, A, because it directly affects your lifestyle choices, but beyond that, independently of that, and there's more research to support that, happiness is associated with better health.
And so as we think about happiness being associated with better health, I think as the nerds that we are, we also have to think about our definition of happiness. And there are lots of different definitions of happiness out there in the literature. You use a sort of 3-prong approach in your book, which I really quite like. So talk to me about the sort of 3 parts of happiness as you think of it.
Yeah, so it took me over 6 months to try and figure out what I call the code to happiness. Now, of course, many people have got their models for approaching happiness. For me as a doctor, I'm always thinking about what's practical. We can talk about big ideas, but how does that busy person with a busy life actually put this into practice? So I was trying to develop a model that really underpins this idea that happiness is a skill. Happiness is a skill that you can get better at if you know how to cultivate it. And so the best way I could explain it to people was with the core happiness stool. So it's basically a 3-legged stool, and each of the legs is an ingredient of happiness. So each one in isolation is going to help, but each one in isolation is not enough in and of itself. And I tested this model with patients. I tried to think about it in all kinds of different scenarios, and as of yet, I haven't found a scenario where it doesn't hold true. So the 3-legged stool of happiness, the way I see it, is composed of alignment, contentment, and control. So alignment is basically about when the person you are inside and the person who you are being out there in the world are one and the same. Okay, so when your inner values and your external actions start to line up more and more, that's alignment. The next leg is contentment. So what are those things in life that give you a sense of peace, a sense of calm, an inner sense of contentment? That's the leg of contentment. And the final leg, which I think is even more important today if we think about the state of the world and what we might be exposed to if we go online or look at the news, for example, the third leg of the stool is control. Now, I thought long and hard about this word because it's not about controlling the world, it's about giving yourself a sense of control. And it's actually subtly different. What are the things you can do in life that give you that sense of control? We know from the research that people who have a strong sense of control over their lives, they're happier, they're healthier, they do better at work, they earn more money, they have better social relationships. So for me, the whole book is basically about practical things that work on 1, 2, or 3 of those legs of the stool. So you're not directly working on happiness, you're doing something, hopefully each day, that works on alignment, contentment, and control, and the side effect of that is you're going to feel happier more often.
And so when you're...
And I think most people want to feel happier more often.
Not just here at WOHASU, where y'all are the choir that we are preaching to, right? But so one of the things I love about your book is that you don't just stop with this definition of happiness. You really try to come up with these 10 practical domains in which people can apply different strategies to start getting happier. And one of the ones that you start with is trying to get past what you call the want brain. I think I know what the want brain is, but I'm going to have you explain it. What is the want brain, and how do we get it wrong?
And can I just say, the reason why everything I do is so practical focused is if you think about my life, for many years it's been seeing patients. So I can't just say to them, hey, look, there's a strong link between happiness and health. Okay? That was going to help your immune system function. I'll see you in a month's time.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I have to be able to tell them and explain something, but then I feel I have to give them something that they can go and develop and cultivate and start to feel it for themselves. So that's why I'm always so practically focused. But the want brain. Okay, so the want brain is that part of your brain that evolved a long time ago, many thousands of years ago, that makes you think you have to compete. There is limited resources. I have to get what's mine. It convinces you that a promotion, a better salary, a nicer phone, a piece of chocolate, although you may disagree with that, but it convinces you that that's going to make you happier. And actually, for most of those things, it's actually a myth. And we know that because there's a lot of research showing us that. There's some research where they phone people up at various parts of the day after they've engaged in certain activities, and we find that actually when people have just bought something online, or they've had a bit of chocolate, or they're getting seduced by the modern myth of success, which often means in the workplace, that people feel less motivated, they feel less confident, and they feel depressed. But the one brain is very, very powerful. And I think we're living in a time where society and culture very much prioritizes the want brain. So many of us get sucked into this trap that more work, more promotion, more Instagram followers, more whatever is going to make us happy. And by and large, in most cases, if you identify that with your happiness, it's going to be a disappointment. And I can tell you, I started the book with I think it's a very powerful story of my dad's. So my dad came to the UK in 1962 from India for a better life. And Dad faced all kinds of discrimination and all kinds of things that many immigrant families of that time will have experienced. But basically, for 30 years, my dad worked 4 nights a week. Right, so he worked in the day as a consultant medical doctor at Manchester Royal Infirmary. But Dad would come home every night, he would shave, he'd have his dinner, and then a car would pick him up at 7 p.m. and Dad would be out doing GP house calls all night. He'd come back at 7 a.m., shave, Mum would give him breakfast, and he'd drive for 30 minutes back into Manchester and work all day. So for 30 years, my dad only slept for 3 nights a week, right? And at 57, my dad gets lupus, he gets chronic kidney failure, and he's on a dialysis machine for 15 years. And my dad died almost 11 years ago now. And I'm convinced that this want brain, that this belief that success and more money is going to make you happier and the people around you happier, I'm convinced that's why my dad got sick and that's why he's no longer here.
I mean, it's such a powerful story. Of course, the problem is it's so hard to shut off the want brain from the basic physical wants of ooh, chocolate to ooh, promotion, ooh, more money. What are some strategies we can use to tackle the want brain? You have an exercise that I think we might even be able to try out quickly here with this audience, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite exercises is in chapter 1 of the book. It's called Write Your Own Happy Ending. And it's so simple, but I think if you take nothing else from our conversation, but just do this exercise and maybe share it with someone in your family or someone who's sitting next to you later on, I honestly believe it will change the trajectory of the next few weeks and months of your life. And it's so, so simple, right? So the first stage is, and yes, as Laurie says, try and imagine it and do it now if you can. Imagine you're on your deathbed, right? Now look back on your life and ask yourself, what are 3 things you will want to have done or spent time on? Right, so you think about that, okay? And then the second part of the exercise is you bring it into the present day and go, okay, what 3 happiness habits do I need to do each week that will give me the happy ending I've just defined I want? It is deceptively simple, right? So for me, at the end of my life, I will want to have spent quality time with my family and friends, like everyone else. I will want to have done something that impacts the people around me in a positive way. And I will want to have spent time or have had time to pursue things that I'm passionate about. So for me, my 3 weekly happiness habits are, and these are written up on my fridge at home, so I see them every day, just on a piece of paper, nothing fancy, very low tech, scrap piece of paper and a pencil, right? I specify I want 5 meals a week with my wife and my 2 kids where I'm completely undistracted. Okay? May not work for you, that works for me. I need to record 1 episode of my podcast each week, which I've been doing for 6.5 years, because I know that will have an impact on the world around me. And if I've had time each week to either go for a long walk in nature, play my guitar, write some songs, play snooker with my son, whatever it might be, I know I've had time to pursue my passions. Now, why that's such a powerful exercise, it doesn't necessarily remove the want brain, right? It doesn't mean I don't also get seduced into these belief systems that the culture will kind of feed into you. But it means that I'm intentionally focusing on the things that are important every single week. Now, those things don't take long, right? It doesn't mean that my email inbox won't overflow and I might get stressed about that. But the problem today, in my view, is that we fit in the important things when everything else is done. But the problem is today, everything else is never done. There's always something else. There's always another email to answer, another person to get back to, another WhatsApp message group to reply to, right? And so if you don't intentionally put in your diary the things that are important for your happiness, I think your happiness is going to wither away. And it's a simple exercise, but it's very, very effective. I do it myself, and I've done it for years with my patients, and they really, really like it.
I think it's so powerful too, because what this exercise causes you to realize is that, like, you're never going to have time to get everything done. Like, you're going to have a bunch of balls in the air, and a lot of those balls are going to fall. But the key is to make sure the right balls fall. And our instinct is never that we let the email ball fall, because it's like, pinging in our phones, in our pockets. But this sort of forces us to say, there's a reason I'm not answering my email, and it's because I'm having dinner with my kids.
Yeah, and I'm the worst person, or one of the worst people in the world at getting back to emails. But you know what? I've made peace with that. I'm okay with that, because me not getting back to emails generally means I'm spending time with my children and my wife. And so I've got very clear that that's important. Now, here's the thing about that deathbed exercise, right? We all think we're different, and we all have individual likes and needs and wants. And yes, of course, there's variability. But on one level, we're not that different. Palliative care nurses who have sat with dying people, like Bronnie Ware, who wrote the book, The 5 Regrets of the Dying, who I had a beautiful conversation with last year when she was in London on my podcast. She explains that after 8 years of sitting with dying people, what are the things that they say? And they all say the same things. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I'd spent more time with my friends and family. I wish I'd lived my life and not the life that other people expected of me. So for me, these things aren't just cute Instagram memes which go viral, right? They don't have to be. We can convert it into action. We can use it as a way of thinking, I don't want to wait until my deathbed to learn what's important, right? And here's the thing, I did mention my dad. One thing I will say though, which I think is really important, and I've reflected on this since I wrote the book and shared the story of my dad. One thing I can't say is that he made the wrong choices. And I'll tell you why I can't say that. If my dad was here today, one of the questions I'd love to ask him is, Dad, was it worth it? Because you know what, for him, coming from India, where he didn't feel there was much opportunity, he may go to me, and I suspect he would actually. And this is where my view has evolved since I wrote Happy Mind, Happy Life. I think my dad was alive today. He may say, hey, son, listen, it was totally worth it. I'd do it all again, because look how I've set you up with a great education. Look what impact you're having on the world. Look what your brother's doing. And I'm now sort of seeing the other side and going, actually, for him, maybe it was worth it.
But the key and the beauty of this exercise is you can figure out what's worth it for you, which is so powerful. And so in our second tip from your book, we're going to explore a practice that you find most important. But unfortunately, we have run out of time. And that means that all of you can only figure out Rangan's second most important thing if you listen to the Happiness Lab podcast. Can we get a big round of applause for Dr. Rangan Chatterjee?
If you enjoyed this amazing well-being content, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.